De-churching is happening all over the United States. People are leaving the church in droves, not just people that go to church, but those that work vocationally in the church as pastors.
Some 40 plus million Americans have stopped attending church. And I'm thinking about the future and that movement and where is the church going to be at in the next 10, 15 years. Most of the ministry work has to be done by people in the congregation. I don't have I'd love to think I would, but I don't have the capacity.
Every time you look at the statistics, you see that this is happening. And so those that are in churches and really, really ambitious for gospel mission have an increasing challenge. And so I'm really excited to just dig into that topic today. And I have with me a special guest, Jeremy Writebol, who's the campus lead pastor for Woodside Bible Church in Plymouth, Michigan. Jeremy, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, John, thanks for having me today. I think you're right on track there, talking about where things are with regard to the church in the United States and this movement of de-churching that we've experienced in the last 25 years. Some 40 plus million Americans have stopped attending church. And I'm thinking about the future and that movement and where is the church going to be at in the next 10, 15 years. And it seems apparent to me that we're in a really critical and pivotal time frame where the church's growth, the gospel's advancement and movement isn't going to be contingent so much on a paid vocational staff or clergy as much as it is going to be the everyday, ordinary, godly people of his church in ordinary spaces being mobilized and equipped to take the gospel message forward. So I'm really excited to talk with you about that today.
Absolutely. And so true. So true. Why don't we start? I would love to hear from you just some background about you, kind of your journey as a vocational pastor, but also just the ministry that you have at Woodside. And, I think that would be great background for all this.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that 25 years ago that we mentioned where this kind of great de-churching started happening was a pivotal time for me where I was really called into vocational ministry and have been serving in, I think, 4 churches now over the last 25 years as a full-time pastor, whether that I started out working with students in youth ministry. And then as I got older, the Lord made it more clear. And it was kind of in my heart all along the way to be a lead pastor, senior pastor at some point and be leading the church, not just from the office of lead pastor, but from the preaching and teaching of God's word. And so I've been kind of on that trajectory over the last 25 years. 10 years ago, the Lord called and moved us to Plymouth, Michigan, where I've been serving with Woodside Bible Church and I've been leading the Plymouth campus and congregation over those last 10 years in ministry and helping us make disciples of Jesus and glorify God and help the gospel advance really in our community. So it's been part of that work just to help people love Jesus. The way our vision statement talks about it is to help people belong to Christ, grow in Christ, and reach the world for Christ. And that's what we're really eager for. So I've been glad to be kind of on the front lines or maybe a front row seat, if you will, to the work of God in our community and in our church.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Maybe give us a little bit of context in terms of, just like size of the congregation, but also like the kind of the team and maybe like splitting your leadership team between those that are, kind of paid pastors and staff versus what I would call lay leaders or really those strong leaders that are almost serving like they're getting paid, but at the same time, they're doing it as volunteers.
Yeah, no, that's a great thought. We so as a church, we are a multi-congregational, multi-site, multi-locational church in the
Yeah.
Detroit metro area. So Woodside has 14 campuses or congregations right now spread over. Yeah, it's a lot, a lot of geographic area
Yeah.
there, and so that dynamic of having and for our congregation, we're probably a smaller to mid-size church, kind of a normative size congregation. And right now we just have 2 full-time staff members and then 2 half-time staff members. So 4 of us at our particular context. But then because we're part of a multi-site, we also have the resources and the support really of the whole church, the other 13 campuses, and many of the staff departments that are, or the departments that are staffed are staffed out of a central team that kind of helps each campus and works with them. And so, and some of those are some of the operational sort of pieces. So like an HR team or an IT or finance team. Some of them are ministry related as well, just to kind of keep all of our campuses working and laboring together well for the sake of the gospel. But a lot of the work is, and most of the work really, I would say, is at the local campus level, and it's among, with 4 staff members, really, in that light. Most of the ministry work has to be done by people in the congregation. I don't have the, I'd love to think I would, but I don't have I don't have the capacity and the omniscience and the omnipresence to do everything in the church at all times and every place. And that's why we need the body of believers. Everybody has a different skill set and gifting and passion, and the Lord places us in our context to be able to do what He's called us to do as a body, as a flock together. So when I came to the church, we were. It was one of the other dynamics about our church is that we were the result of a merger. So there was a church that was kind of in its decline stages, and their staff at that prior church had retired out. They had aged out. So it was a smaller congregation, maybe had the finances for maybe one more budget year, and we're kind of looking forward to say, how do we keep this lighthouse open? How do we see the gospel advance? And yet we need fresh new leadership, and that's when they begin to interact with Woodside. And so when we arrived, it was the first Sunday of Woodside Bible Church Plymouth. Like I am day one pastor
Yeah.
there, and with that group of 70, we began to reach into our community and go, okay, how can we do the work of the gospel? And a lot of that had to do with setting up even some systems and some structures around who does what. How do we operate these things? How do we work? I think that we could talk about this if we wanted to later, but I think that having a really healthy deaconess ministry
Yeah.
is a key to success in equipping the saints for the work of ministry. We just had to hand off stuff all the way around to lay people to say, hey, can you be a part of counseling or doing mentoring for these couples that are getting married? Can you work in the nursery? Can you be a part of leading a life group? And just really delegating and handing off and training and equipping and saying, hey, come with us into this ministry work, but we need you to be a part of that as well. And we still to this day are asking people, hey, come be a part of this ministry work. We've got new challenges and new things ahead of us that we need folks to step up and into, and we want to see that happen.
Yeah. Well, and I just think about that ratio. I mean, having a
Mm.
congregation that large, and it's really, 4 paid staff, two pastors, 2 staff people, almost impossible to function without a lot of volunteer leaders.
Mhm.
And but at the same time, I think, actually I'm always very interested in the multi-site approach. I know Brad House's involvement in there. I remember reading a book years back called Multi-Site,
Mhm.
talking about like how do you structure that, and so having that back office does really kind of help. It's essentially your it's a shared service, you might
Yep.
call it in the
Yep.
business world, or just really looking at, there's some functions that need to be there, but don't necessarily have to be the responsibility of the pastor. And
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting on that end of it. And then I think, like you said, the being able to mobilize
Mhm.
leaders, the structure being, a biblically founded model of deaconess type of a model of ministry, that really opens up a world of possibilities.
Yeah.
I've talked to so many pastors that are doing all of it. They're doing the
Mhm.
back office. They're
Mhm.
running payroll, and they're doing the HR, and they're doing leading all the teams, and they're doing all the work, and they're fixing up the building, and doing counseling, going to the hospital, all these things, and then you see this burnout. You see, average
Right.
pastors, I think it's around 18 months or something like that. When you look at Barna statistics. And so, wow, just being able to have a way to, mobilize people, mobilize leaders
Mhm.
is so key. What are some of the structures you have in place to help formalize that?
Yeah, I think that leadership team, if you will, that I talked about, and we're a church that's led by elders, and so we have a group of godly, qualified men who carry the responsibility for shepherding and oversight and pastoral leadership and care and teaching and preaching of the word. The things that the scriptures talk about with regard to elders. But from that, we really recognized there's a lot of things we want to do, and maybe our eyes are bigger than our plate in many ways, but there's a lot of ways that we want to serve and minister. And so I just begin to list out, okay, what are the ministry areas that kind of um, maybe are immediately necessary for a functioning local church. You got to have somebody leading. If you have next generation kids, infants, all that in your church, you got to have somebody leading kids ministry so you can serve and facilitate that well. If you have a building, I'm not a handy guy, not at all.
Me neither.
And I am the wrong person every time to come to and say, hey, what about this or that? I just don't know that stuff. So we got to have somebody who can know buildings, know how to fix it, know how to raise up a team, and get others volunteers to do that sort of thing. Um, there's benevolent needs and ministry that can happen to those in need within our church and even within our community. Who's responsible? Who can help distribute those funds and those resources to help people in need in those areas? And then we just begin to there's a whole list of things we could do and have done. I just begin to make out a list and say, okay, I need to start assigning or asking people to handle this, to take this. And the ask I was making was not that they do it themselves. I wasn't going to go to a facility deacon and say, hey, I would like it if you fixed everything in the building. Just go do that. My first thing was to say, hey, listen, I want you to raise up a team of people to do this. Like, I want you to get others involved. Make volunteer opportunities. We'll promote them through email and through talking about them on Sunday mornings or just wherever we need to. But I want you to raise up a team to be able to handle this. So it doesn't all ride on you either, but you're kind of a captain, if you will, of that particular ministry and area. And you go handle it. That's, I think, one of the ways the Bible talks about the deacon ministry is like, hey, elders appoint deacons. So if you think about Acts 6, where the apostles have this need in front of them, and they say, hey, listen, we could do it. We could handle the feeding of the Greek-speaking Jewish women, but that would neglect from the ministry of the word and prayer. So why don't you guys appoint 7 men full of the Holy Spirit, and they'll go do it, and we'll back you, and we'll support it. But that responsibility doesn't land on us anymore. And that I think is the prototype for the ministry of deacons, deaconesses. And so that's what we've done. I've
Yeah.
said, hey, will you you're qualified biblically by what First Timothy 3 talks about. I see your character, your love for the Lord and Jesus. Will you go run our hospitality ministry? Take care of that. Like, raise up your teams, do it, have a blast. If you need resources and help, let me know. I'm here to support you. But like, go do it. And so just making those lists and kind of creating that leadership structured infrastructure, if you will, has been a way that we've been able to hand off ministry and be able to grow and flourish in that too.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And I've done some videos on this channel and talked a bit about what I call champions and serving
Hmm.
circles.
Hmm.
And, a champion is that person that already has a serving circle wrapped around
Yep.
them. Serving circles is the
Yep.
people that do work together in some capacity. It might be they actually work together occasionally. It might be that they have a club together. Maybe they
Hmm.
just hang out and work on cars together, or just love interior design and, whatever the kind of thing that brings them together. But then that champion's usually that person that's kind of at the center of it, and,
Right.
seeing them naturally and reaching out to them. Can you think of one or two examples where you reached out to somebody and said, hey, this isn't my cup of tea, can you run with this? And then they really took off with it.
Yeah, I have a big heart for men's ministry and want to see that flourish in our church. But again, also limited capacity. And so for years, have led kind of a early morning weekday men's huddle is what I call it. And I just invite all the guys in our church, hey, come. If you want, come show up at 6:30. We're gonna take a book. We're gonna read through it or listen to it on audio book. We're gonna discuss it. It's going to be a form of discipleship for us over the course of the school year. Um, and we've had good group of men over the years that have been a part of that. Well, there was another guy in our church who said, "Hey, I'm really passionate about men's ministry myself. I want to see our guys flourish and thrive. The problem is like that." that time frame doesn't work for me or for several other men I know. What do we do about that? And so I had the option in front of me and saying, well, okay, I can do another one on, Saturday or Tuesday night or whatever. And it just occurred to me, like, this guy, he's a godly man. He's leaning in on Jesus. He's growing. He's got that circle around him of other guys that are asking questions. And so I just said to him, Jason, why don't you do something? What time works for you? Go get your guys, make it happen. And he was kind of like, oh, okay, really? Like,
It's like,
little timid to begin with. And I said,
yeah,
no, man, I believe in you. I'm here for you. How can I resource you? And they started doing it on us, doing that on a Saturday morning, and the thing has exploded. It's really just full of just so many guys that are coming out on Saturday morning, experiencing deep gospel change and transformation in community. It's wonderful. So much so that they come back and say, "Hey, can we just start planning some other events like here or there that could get all the guys of the church?" And I'm just happy to say, yes, absolutely. The Lord's with you, and I'm with you on that. And so that's just been a really cool thing where other guys are taking ownership and saying, "Hey, I want to plan this. I want to be engaged in doing this to help serve our neighbors. Is that okay?" And I just really think one of the things that a pastor should have in his heart and mind is the attitude of saying, when people want to talk about and do ministry, the answer should be yes.
yeah,
As far be it where it keeps within your focus of mission and your parameters of ministry. Try and say as yes as much as possible to those who are asking to do ministry. It will just create a culture of empowerment, of enablement, of mobilization, as we're talking about, and encouragement, where people say, "Hey, I like." The leadership of this church sees that I have giftings or desires. They're willing to support me in that. They're willing to validate that, and I think that's just where the Holy Spirit works through His people, and not necessarily bottlenecking it through one particular individual or leader. So I try and say yes to those ministry passions and opportunities, as long as they fit within our church mission parameters as a whole, as much as possible, just to see where God's at work and let Him lead the way in that.
yeah. I love that. Well, and what's interesting about Jason's story is, I'd be interesting to hear now. It's like, it's what a great opportunity for him
Hmm.
to not just serve, not just kind of fill the role of leader, but to just what I imagine his own development would look like,
Yeah.
just through that process. I'd be interested. Like you said, he was a little timid. Is he? How does he look different today than when that started?
Yeah, it was a moment of kind of like, well, okay, I want to do this, I want to serve, and I think he has more of had in his mind a little bit more of like the serving and the tangible kind of physicality ways of serving. I can go rake a yard or do something to help somebody else. It's more in like the teaching, or facilitating leadership gifts that were maybe a little bit underdeveloped for him to begin with, and so he starts out and we say, okay, let's do this. Here's the resources, here's how I do it. And then other men in that circle that were with him also were, Jason fans, if you will. They love him, encouraging him as well. And so they're saying, hey, we're not going to let you bomb out on this. Like, we're here with you in it, and we can provide some insight and resources for you, and we support you. And so Jason even himself hasn't carried it all, but he's been able to distribute it, and it's given him more confidence in leading discussion. It's given him more confidence in encouraging men. And he just, like, you can kind of see that, just that dignity kind of rise up in him a little bit in a godly and appropriate way of like, hey, um, the Lord is with me in this, and I'm seeing men's lives change. We just came back last weekend from a men's retreat, that most of the guys at that retreat um, were in Jason's circle there. And man, you could just tell those guys loved and affirmed and were ready to follow him, to storm the gates of hell
That's
together.
awesome.
And it provided such a deep space of of transparency among those men, that they just had that camaraderie together. That so when the like, some of the questions came out about their hearts and lives, and maybe even some of the challenge from certain messages about sin and things like that, those men were just able to open up and be honest with each other, and share the gospel with each other and grow.
That's awesome. Well, very cool. So now let's maybe flip the coin a little bit. What
Mhm.
are some areas or some maybe even some situations or scenarios where you feel like you've faced mobilization challenges. You've got
Yeah.
this big organization, limited
Yeah.
resources. What are some you've faced, or maybe it's some even that you're facing right now?
That is a very um, present conversation, and I'm grateful that you asked about it. Our church right now, and it's hilarious to me. I'm so grateful for it. We are going through, I think, for a congregation of about, so let's just say we have 200 on a Sunday morning. For a congregation of 200, we're going through the biggest baby boom in, I think, in the history of the world. I
But
kid you not, John, from the beginning of 2022 to today, there are 50 children under the age of 3 in our
wow,
congregation right now, and there have been nearly 20 infants born in the last year, just in the last 12 months calendar. So
wow,
so we've got this space issue that's part of the dynamic of all of this, of like, where do we put all these babies and kids? But what's happening in that, where a lot of these young families that have been very engaged in the church, and they still are, but have been participating in serving and ministry and that sort of thing, they're kind of sensing, hey, I've got this newborn in my life now, and I've got to really step back to be able to like figure out, this newborn or my young family and how to care for them. And so what that's doing is it's creating there's this point where people are stepping back from ministry on Sunday mornings, or in teams in the church, and rightly so. I don't fault them at all, because they need
sure.
that ability. But then and because that's such a large portion of our church, and so much of that's happening right now, it actually feels like it's creating a vacuum of opportunity, and a vacuum of space for ministry needs. And so we're constantly up against the wall of like, hey, we need more people to step in and serve with kids. Like, every one of our ministry teams right now, our kids team, our hospitality team, our first impressions connect team, security, like all worship team, all of them need folks to step into ministry. And we're not that typical church that's 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. We're a much higher ratio. I would even say beyond 50-50 on that.
That's
but
awesome. That
but
is a
this
great
season right
situation.
now,
Yeah.
yeah, this season right now of like so many children being born is just creating this, like I said, a vacuum of leadership. And so we're trying to figure out where are people that can serve and be a part of this, and help meet these ministry needs, while we've got so many great things happening with this next generation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I mean, what's interesting about that is like, it's kind of moving your attention into succession planning.
Yep.
how do we fill these
Hey, I'm
roles?
not that old, okay? I'm not-
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, not even just
no.
at the, I think a lot of times when you hear someone talk about succession and planning in the church, you think about elders or pastors,
Right.
but it's like even at the ministry and program level,
Hmm.
there's finding that champion with a serving circle they bring to bear, but recognizing that there will be a season for
Yep.
that person or that group to focus on that ministry, and then a time when they need to step away from it. So, yeah, what's a process or system to make
Hmm.
sure that next leader is coming alongside and being ready and prepared, Timothy to Paul kind of a situation, so that they can step in and move that forward. So you've had an opportunity to really dig into the Nehemiah way in some
Hmm.
pretty unique ways. I'd be interested in just your thoughts about potential applications of this model and some of the things that are here, just things that you could or have incorporated from this book and the ministry you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I want to say, and maybe this would be worth saving for the end too. But every leader that is thinking about mobilizing their people and handing off ministry, really cannot do that apart from starting with prayer. Um,
Absolutely.
One of the things I love about the Nehemiah way is the structures, and the sense of like preparation and planning, and just kind of getting a sense to lay out the field, see the need, and go, here's how we can systematically work our way to accomplishing what God has called for us to do. And in a lot of ways, we desperately need that kind of vision, and that kind of sense of planning and ability there. Sometimes I think we look at um, the big vision things that are in front of us. would talk with our congregation about, I would love, to see every human being in a 5-mile radius of our church building hear the gospel, hear the good news of Jesus Christ from somebody at our church. Like, that's just kind of a vision there of mission for us. And I could say that, and I remember the first time I shared that in our church, everybody went, there was just like this. There was an audible gasp in the room, and I'm like, oh, I didn't think that was that crazy, but maybe it is. Like,
Yeah.
and there was this sense of like, well, do you know how many people live around here? Like, we're just kind of like this small community. There's a couple hundred of us on a Sunday morning, and to see every individual in a 5-mile radius hear the good news of Jesus from somebody at our church, like, how's that going to happen? And I think oftentimes those big vision, desires and goals and aims from God, we keep them too big because we don't see that to do that, to get there, there's a whole bunch of little processes and steps and just ordinary faithfulness things in front of us that we
Yeah.
can lay out to accomplish that. And it's in some ways like writing a book. Like, oh, to write a book is a huge, massive thing, but when you break it down, you just like work on a chapter, work on a paragraph, work on a small piece of it. Before long, you've got way more than you thought you did to begin with. And so I go back to, like, I love the systems and the structures and the planning and laying out. I think there's big vision that we can accomplish as God's people if we will see that big vision and begin to break it down into the smaller pieces of what is this section of the wall, if you will,
Yeah.
need, and who can be the champion to kind of step up and kind of fill that out and have a team around them. But here's where I'll come back to this. None of that matters. I'll even say it that way, apart from the work of God
Yeah.
leading us in that. And that's where I think the critical issue of the whole book and of your challenge in front of us starts at the very beginning with prayer.
Mm.
We must be Holy Spirit dependent people. We must be people like Nehemiah who see a big need, and instead of saying, well, let me whip out my plans and like get stuff written down, go, God, where am I in this? What do you like? Here's my heart. Here's my desire. I think this matches what your heart desire is for this city, for this place, for this church. Give me favor in that. Lead me, provide for me. Ask God all those things, and let him take the lead on that, and sit and even wait on him to lead you in that sort of thing. But then, trust him big.
Yeah. I just think about so much of the book of Nehemiah just connects to that in the sense that Nehemiah was such an ordinary guy, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't like this big dynamic person. He wasn't the king of, the monarch of, the ruler
No.
of. He's this very simple guy. And then you look at the magnitude of this project, which even just the wall, and as I always like
Mhm.
to say, it's not about the wall. That's like the
Right.
smallest thing that happens in the book of Nehemiah. But like that was such a massive project that everyone surrounding the situation was like, there's no way. It could never be
Mhm.
done. In 20, 30 years, it couldn't be done. And he does it in 52 days.
Right.
Well, and so God's in it. There's no
Yep.
way you can't, you never coordinate that many people in that way without God being
Mhm.
in it. And at the same time, you read through this account and he's like very detailed, like break it down. It's like, tangibly, very practically possible. 43
Mhm.
segments, 43 champions, 43 serving circles. Everybody build like 130, 40 feet of wall and, let's do 4 feet and then
Let's
go to
get it
8
done.
feet.
Yeah.
You see this tangible thing. But then at the same time, knowing what we do about people,
Yeah.
realizing the miracle in it, even though you can practically look at the plan and you can look at all the breakdown, is God was in it every step of the way.
Mhm.
And God brought all the people together. It's like, there was the tactical, practical work to be done, but in the end, it was only God that would motivate that and make it happen, which in his sovereignty, which was just
Yeah.
such a beautiful thing. So I love that.
Yeah. I
So
have a pastoral mentor in my life who he would always or often say, as we think about ministry and as we think about the future and vision, let's not overcomplicate it. Let's just do the next obvious thing for the
yeah,
glory of God. And I think that was what was on Nehemiah's heart, of hearing of the destruction and just kind of the ruin of the city, and saying, it just seems obvious to me that for the glory of God, for the sake of his name, and for his promises that he's made to Israel and then to the nations, something has to be done. And so, he goes and he just pleads with God, if I'm a part of that, please, if you've got me positioned here and um, in this kingdom to be able to have some influence to that end, send me, make it happen. And then those next obvious things just started to come unfold for him, and he walked faithfully in that.
Yeah. Well, and just how like practical and relevant today as it
Mhm.
was in Nehemiah's time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we wrap, a couple things. First, I'd just be interested in connection points, like some of the things we're talking about, how it's played into the work you've done. I know you've just recently released a book, "Make It Your Ambition," and you do a lot of work with Gospel Central Discipleship as
Mhm.
part of that organization. What are some ways you've applied and used some of these same practices in the other work that you're doing to further the gospel?
Yeah, I think that's one of the dynamics of what we even started talking about with the nature of the church, and where we're at in this current moment, and saying, hey, look, there's this great dechurching that's happened, and it's interesting, even in recent days, some of the reports I've read maybe are indicating that we've kind of hit the end of that dechurching moment, and there's now some spiritual momentum and movement happening. um, and I'm like, great, that's wonderful that we're in that moment now. But what about 10 years from now? What about 15 years from now? And what does the church need? And what's it going to look like? And so I think the future church, 10 to 15 years now in the United States, it has to be more, um, I'll say, lay empowered. The church is not going to have, probably, if trends bear out, we may not have as many churches, and we definitely will not have as many vocational ministry leaders that we do now. And so I want to ask the question: how do we help maybe fill those pipelines for leadership development and for calling people into ministry? And so, really, if you're 40, you're going to be 55 in 15 years, and kind of and that's kind of I'm speaking maybe to myself here, like, the time to have equipped and prepared the church for that 15-year future is today, and it's
Yeah.
not going to be the leaders like me that are the ones who are stepping into that leadership moment. It's going to be the 15-year-olds right now who are
Yeah.
stepping into that moment and needing to be equipped and called. So I want to make sure that we call out this next generation. I want to speak into the 15 to 25-year-olds right now and say, hey, what's that trajectory of your life? And that's one of the things that my book is trying to do, is say, hey, have you even given thought to, it's not the first question I ask. I want to build a trajectory of life for them. So I speak about, our life's ambition. Every Christian's life ambition should be to know and love God. Let's just start there, and then let's think about pursuing the character of Christ. And we should be people of high integrity and Christ likeness in our lives. And we should know how God has gifted us. We should know and begin to develop and build those competencies of His gifting in our lives, both talents and spiritual gifting. Um, and we need to think about the kind of the trajectory of our vocation. Am I going to live just to make money and to, have all the pleasure in the world that I can, and kind of, you only live once, so let me make sure I get it all? Or is my life and my life's work going to be something that is for the benefit of our fellow human beings, and for the good of society and people? And so, can I live and work in such a way that I've got a service orientation in my vocational pursuits? Um, and I get to talking about all those things to say, hey, listen, if those are true, then I want to ask you to consider: has God called you, or is God working in your heart and life right now to call you to maybe be one of those Christian ministry leaders, that's your career and vocation, of where you're serving as a missionary in a foreign context, and maybe you're serving on a campus ministry as a collegiate leader to kind of equip that next generation. Perhaps you're a pastor or ministry leader in a local church. I want to call that out right now and
Yeah.
prepare that, at least set the trajectory for now, so that 15 years from now, those leaders are equipped and ready and there's a number of them who are able to see the gospel advance in the world. So things like that are like, okay, we've got to develop those leaders. We've got to identify them. We've got to begin equipping them, kind of handing them a bit of a, here's a vision, here's a plan, here's a section of the wall, and let's prepare you and call you into that and see that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the way you do that in Make It Your Ambition, just, calling young people out, but also giving them some tangible ways to think about it. I think so often everyone seems surprised when people in their, early 20s leave the church.
Yeah.
Or like, after they leave high school or leave home. And I sometimes see, what I observe is they really weren't ever part of the church because they weren't allowed, they weren't invited in, they weren't even allowed in some cases, to be part of the work of the church or even to lead in a capacity that they can early on. And so, really just calling out like, this is a young person who is a critical, important member of this church or a part of this church, and having those opportunities.
Yeah.
Think about Paul saying to Timothy, like, don't let people dismiss you because you're young. You saw Paul was very actively pouring into developing, encouraging, empowering Timothy to be a leader from very early on, and just such a great thing to see the way you're encouraging that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great. I think if we want to be the church boys for the next generation, we gotta let the next generation get involved, be a part of it, like actually hand them ministry. Like some of the if you're at a ministry where like you've got technology questions and issues, probably I'll say it this way. Probably the best person who knows that stuff or who can figure it out in a way that's going to be really helpful is not a 45-year-old guy. It's probably a 15-year-old who's expressing that and into the digital world and can say, oh yeah, I can do that, and rock it out. And that's not to say anything against 45-year-old men, but it's to say,
well, let's face it, we're struggling with like the most recent Apple update. So I get it.
Let them have it, let them run it, let them do it. They're going to do it far better than you are anyway. So release them and call them into it, encourage them, and release them into go and make it happen. And you'll see the beauty of the body of Christ really unfold in the various ways and capacities and giftings that he's given to us.
I love it. So just final kind of thing as we wrap up here, and this is looking at the story of Nehemiah. What's your favorite Nehemiah moment?
Yeah, there's probably two. One is I love the way that he after prayer, right? So he doesn't just pray and then just sit on it and go, God, are you there? He gets the boldness to ask.
Yeah.
And he goes to the king and he says, this may cost me my life. Okay. For the glory of God, it's very much worth it, right?
Yeah.
And so while I spoke about prayer earlier, I don't want to dismiss the call for us to take that step in our prayers of that next do that next ordinary thing for the glory of God. The next ordinary thing for that moment for Nehemiah was to go talk to the king, right? He could have said, "Oh, king, or God, would you just put it on the heart of the king to come and talk to me about it?" And he takes personal responsibility, even at great cost to himself, to say, "I'm going to go ask." And so I think there's that dynamic for us of like, hey, pray about these things, lead with God, intercede. Again, if we're not prayerful about this, then uh, I think we're really going to miss the work of the Spirit and His direction and leadership. But then once we've prayed, go talk to Him, go and act, go work, and take that next ordinary step. So I love that. And then there's always that compelling picture of as they're building the wall, and there's some of the persecution and kind of the trouble that's happening with them in that. There's this two-handed aspect of it, right? They've got a trowel in one hand working on the wall, they've got a sword in the other. I don't know, I love that kind of vision of laboring for the good of the city in front of me, and also being vigilant to protect and to guard against against the enemy and against the forces of evil that would come against me. And so I've always had that in my heart from Nehemiah of like being that having both tools in my hand as I labor for the Lord of working to build and working to protect. And
Yeah.
I think that would be something that's helpful for leaders to consider.
Yeah, I love that. Building the kingdom and fighting the good fight.
Yep.
That's awesome. Jeremy, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for sharing your story and things about your ministry and just the way you're seeking to mobilize others for gospel mission. I love it.
John, thank you. It's been my pleasure to be with you today. And yeah, very, very grateful for you and for the Nehemiah Way, and excited just to see more and more people and more churches and ministries just grow and flourish as a result of your great work there. Thank you.
Of course. Awesome. Glad you're here.